Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he met a Jew named Aquila, it means eagle in Latin, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. Pontus is one of the many words that the Greeks use to describe the sea, and usually by Pontus they mean the Black Sea. Now we know that indeed Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome, and that was not the first time that the Roman authorities had decreed against them. The Romans, when they started conquering these different nations around the world, they were not really interested in their religion. All that the Romans wanted was peace and stability. And for the most part, they would recognize the religions of their subject peoples as being legitimate. In the end, the Romans created also the cult of the emperor, which starts with Octavian Augustus. So the emperor is the head, and the empire is the body. So you can imagine how strange it sounded to their ears when Paul was saying that Jesus is the head and the church is the body. Or if you like, if you want to bring accusations against him, you can use that.
Okay, good.
So the Romans recognized the other religions as being legitimate, but they were always reluctant to allow things behind closed doors. They were always reluctant to allow things that create kind of chaotic situation or kind of out of control. We know, for example, that many years before this edict of Claudius, the Romans had expelled from the city of Rome the follower of Bacchus. Bacchus is the Latin equivalent of Dionysus, the god of wine. It was too wild for them. We also know that at some point they launched a crusade. There was a persecution against the Druids in Gaul. The Romans, all that they wanted from their citizens was to be quiet and respectful. The Roman law was reigning above them all. And as a unifying factor had chosen the cult of the emperor. So one required, a citizen of the Roman Empire, in order to show his loyalty, had simply to pray or make a small sacrifice, sometimes simply burn a bit of incense in front of the statue of the emperor. The truth is that the Roman emperors never believed that they were really gods, except for a few demented ones. But that was a way to make sure that somebody accepted the rule. Now, for the Jews, that was pure idolatry, and the Romans were smart enough to exempt them from that. So all that was required from the Jews was for the high priest to pray for the well-being of the emperor. So, of course, for many years, in the first centuries of the Christian era, the Romans could not understand that the Christians were not Jews. They always thought of them as a Jewish sect that was creating trouble, especially when the Christians were reluctant to worship the statue of the emperor. To them, that was a clear challenge to their authority. It was like declaring telling they were unruly and unfaithful and not loyal to their faith. The other thing that the Romans were reluctant to let happen was gatherings behind the closed doors. Now, what usually happens in a synagogue. The Romans were always very suspicious of such things because they always thought that maybe there is trouble brewing. So what's really going on in a synagogue when they close the doors? Why are these people are gathering? Why is it so explosive? You know that at some point a Roman author wrote that in his lifetime there were so many people attracted to the Jewish way. Basically, he was referring to the number of Gentiles in Rome that had become proselytes, that they were threatening the Roman way of life, even within Rome itself. That's why the Romans were always touchy about these subjects, and that's why at some point when the Jews started becoming a major annoyance to them, they came out with an edict to that they be expelled. And we know that it was not that successful because later on some other Romans again came up with new edicts to expel the Jews out of the city. Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker as they were, he stayed and worked with them. And again, this was one of the verses that was heavily attacked in the past. Now the argument was, in the city that has not one but two ports. It happens to be one of the biggest merchant trading centers in the world at the time. A city that's crowded by merchants and sailors. How on earth can you earn your living as a tent maker? Again, the answer has to do with the Isthmian Games. They were so popular that several thousand people will never find accommodation within the different rooms to let they had at the time, or the hotels. So if Paul happened to be here or chose to be here during or shortly before the Isthmian Games, he could have definitely earned his living as a tent maker. All the more that if he happened to be here when Erastus was the curator of public works of the city of Corinth, they might have met simply because Erastus would have been one of the people in charge of such activities. Well, charge, that is, to monitor such activities. The other interesting thing about Paul is this, is that he was born in Tarsus, which was a Greek colony in southern Asia Minor, famous for philosophical schools, but also famous for another thing. It's leather workers. To this day, from this year, I have this very, very good quality of leather. It's usually goat leather. And we know that the Jews would always teach a trade to their sons. Now, an aristocratic person, whether Roman or Greek, would be considered to be that humiliating, like working with its hands. Now, for the Jews, it was not the same. So it makes sense, Paul being from Tarsus in Cilicia, being a person that can actually create tents, being a tent maker. Just imagine that the products of the area of Tarsus, which was a province of Cilicia, were so famous that the name of the province was actually a brand name for their product. They were called Cilicians. Now, every Sabbath he reasoned in the synagogue, trying to persuade Jews and Greeks. When Silas and Timothy came from Macedonia, Paul devoted himself exclusively to preaching, testifying to the Jews that Jesus was the Christ. But when the Jews opposed Paul and became abusive, he shook out his clothes in protest and said to them, "Your blood be on your own heads. I am clear of my responsibility. From now on I will go to the Gentiles." Then Paul left the synagogue and went next door to the house of Titius Justus, a worshipper of God. People say that it was very delicate on the behalf of Paul, like, I'm going to the house of a proselyte, so I'm not irritating the Jews, like going to the house of a Gentile. I'm not irritating the pagans, because Titius Justus is definitely a Roman name. Crispus, the synagogue ruler, and his entire household believed in the Lord, and many of the Corinthians who heard him believed and were baptized. Crispus, it's a Latin name. Later on we read of another synagogue ruler, Sosthenes, or Sosthenes in Greek, which is a Greek name. We know that the Jews would often take names of their surrounding society. Imagine this city being at least bilingual. That is, we have a ruling class of Romans. It is so powerful that the Romans decided to use it as the capital of the province that included all of southern Greece. It was called Achaia. All the important inscriptions of the city would have been in Latin. But still, the majority of the population were Greek speakers. Not to mention how many different communities of settlers from other parts of the empire or merchants would have been in the city. One night, the Lord spoke to Paul in a vision. "Do not be afraid, keep on speaking, do not be silent, for I am with you and no one is going to attack and harm you, because I have many people in this city." So Paul stayed for a year and a half, teaching them the word of God. While Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, the Jews made a united attack on Paul and brought him to court. This man, they charged, is persuading the people to worship God in ways contrary to the law. When the Romans started conquering the East, they found institutions that were much older than their own. Well, you're right, you see some excavations going